Hey guys, so we're back reading Black Marxism. I apologize that it's been so long, but thank you for your patience. We are on section 3, Black Radicalism and Marxist Theory, chapter 11, Richard Wright and the creation of class theory, and the critique of class theory, and then Wright's social theory is the section on page 293. I hope all is well. Wright, in having constructed the character of Bigger Thomas in Native Son, has been attributed with a variety of achievements, intents, and concerns. Addison Gale, echoing many of his critical predecessors, argues that Wright created the archetypal stereotype of the Black man, thus releasing American consciousness from that particular beast of burden. Elsewhere, one finds Native Son understood as a complement of the monstrous legend it was written to destroy. Bigger and Uncle Tom's descendants, flesh of his flesh, exact opposite, a portrait, a study of the psychology of the outcast, and as a statement of the human predicament. In other words, Wright's early work had been characterized as a variety of by a variety of critics along a continuum ranging between a racially specific protest to a universal declaration. It might be useful, however, to add another and quite different dimension of Native Son, a dimension found in Wright's own consciousness of the work. In 1944, upon his formal declaration of leave from the American Communist Party, the break occurred in 1942, Wright made a number of his other concerns quite clear. Some of them had to do with the reasons he first became a part of American radicalism. I hope all is well, y'all. Listen. And the quote is, it was not the economics of communism, nor the great power of trade unions, nor the excitement of underground politics that claimed me. My attention was caught by the similarity of the experience of workers in other lands, by the possibility of uniting scattered but kindred people into a whole. Here at last, in the realm of revolutionary expression, Negro experience could find a home, a functioning value, and role. Marxist propaganda suggested to him that blacks need not be alone. Girl, there's so many books on here. I just stretched out. Okay, sorry. I just stretched. I was getting tight, like uncomfortable. Marxist propaganda suggested to him that blacks need not be alone in their struggle for liberation and dignity. The specter of the world of slow down. A specter of a world proletariat united and strong, black and white, fascinated Wright. Before that evening of his intellectual conversion, he had looked upon the party as a white man's organization and therefore something to be distrusted, especially in its pretensions concerning blacks. More important, until that moment, he had dismissed as a personal fantasy, as a painful, frustrating dream, the organization of poor and oppressed. Again, on that same evening, his first visit to a John Reed club, Wright commented, I was meeting men and women who I should know for decades to come, who were to form the first sustained friendships in my life. He had discovered not merely an important historical vista, but someone with whom to share it. Still, beyond the social vision of Marxism and the fraternity of American communism, Wright's decision to become a part of this movement was motivated by one other element: the opportunity to transform himself from passive victim to active advocate. Here, then, was something that I could do. Oh, it's a quote. Reveal, say. The communists, I felt, had oversimplified the experience of those whom they sought to lead. In their efforts to recruit masses, they had missed the meaning of the lives of the masses, had conceived of people in too abstract a manner. I would try to put some of that meaning back. I would tell communists how common people felt, and I would tell common people of the self-sacrifice of the communists who strove for unity among them. Wright perceived his task as providing to the movement a language and images that would give meaning to the abstracted proletariat of party ideology. The complex of motives vision, fraternity, and task might seem sufficient to explain to the readers of Uncle Tom's Children, Laud. It's LAW, so I'm thinking like Lord, but Laud Today, and Native Son, Wright's sociological and political preoccupations in his early works. Yet, Wright, as we shall see, was to have a very different experience, which provided other and very different themes for the last of these three works. Wright had entered the party naive of its history, its factionalism, and its purgative vocabulary. As we have seen, he was not yet convinced earlier of the sincerity of American communists. This is somewhat surprising given the enormous vitality of the party's Negro work at the time, work that included the defense of the Scottsboro Boys, the confrontation with conservative Black organizations, the organizing of unemployed councils and tenant leagues, the development of the Black Belt thesis on self-determination, and the organizing of the League of Struggle for Negro Rights, and on the international level, the International Trade Union Committee for Negro Workers. So I got two books. Where'd you go? Oh. So this one, At the Dark End of the Street, Black Women, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this word on YouTube, so. And Resistance, A New History of the Civil Rights Movement from Rosa Parks to the Rise of Black Power. And it talks about, one, the origins of the Civil Rights Movement being in the struggle for dignity and respect and the defense of Black womanhood. Black women were experiencing sexual assault, harassment, and by the hands of my people, even police. And so, for example, there's this woman named Reese Taylor, Ingram. I'm trying to go based off of my head. Black women and men. Men were also experiencing castration and lynching. This book gets down. It's a really good book, and it talks about the Scottsboro Boys, the work between liberals and left and communist people on the left, to be able to working within like the civil rights movement, blah blah blah. The next book is Black Internationalist Feminism. In the introduction, it is talking about the Black Belt Nation thesis. Claudia Jones is a really prominent person. The book is on my iPad, and I'm recording the book on my iPad. When we get there, we'll get there. Hold on. Let's just keep going. Woo! Sorry, y'all. Though he had been a hospital worker, he had identified himself as a writer. And as a writer, he was categorized by those in the party's ranks as an intellectual. This meant that Wright was to be subjected to the diffidence shown by intellectuals, but more significantly among his Black comrades, that he was also to be held in suspicion for petit bourgeois tendencies, that is, selfish interests, and worse, Trotskyism. The result was inevitable. Successive disillusionment had transformed his original enthusiastic and total dedication into wariness. His individualism was against him. He was at the mercy of leaders like Oliver Law and Harry Haywood, ostracized from Unit 205 by certain Black comrades and even denigrated. Invited to the party trial of another Black party member, one whose early experience in the South Wright had based his short story, Big Boy Leaves Home, Wright realized that the trial was also meant for someone else. The blindness of their limited lives truncated, shortened, and impoverished by the oppression they had suffered long before they had ever heard of communism, made them think that I was their enemy, that I was with their enemies. American life had so corrupted their consciousness that they were unable to recognize their friends when they saw them. I know that if they had held state power, I should have been declared guilty of treason. He recognized among his Black co-workers an anger dammed up to the level of destruction of self. This was not an ideology that lay at the base of their needs to physically violate errant comrades. Their dogmatism was an enveloping shield against egocide. Their conformity was a symptom of their desperate and collective need for each other. Wright would write later, they're blind. Their enemies had blinded them with too much oppression. This, then, is the crisis that informed the development of Bigger Thomas. Native Son was the result of Wright's resolve to have his say, his revision of American Marxism as it emerged from the lives and practices of American communists. In the quote is, I would hurl words into the darkness and wait for an echo, and if an echo sounded, no matter how faintly, I would send other words to tell, to march, to fight, to create a sense of the hunger for life that gnaws in all of us, to keep us alive in our hearts, a sense of the inexpressible human. In Native Son, Wright sought to display a more authentic, more historical, more precise image of the proletariat to which the party had committed itself. He had begun the task in laud today, and it came into fruition. Girl, slow down. And it came into fruition in the form of Bigger Thomas. Wright, hesitant in wrestling with Marxism on theoretical terms, pursued his critique of American left ideology in his own terms, the novel. Bigger Thomas's lack of class consciousness, more precisely the odyssey of his development of consciousness, is deliberate and purposive, like purposeful. Okay. This was not simply a literary device, but a means of coming to grips with the abstraction and romanticization of the, I don't know, girl, don't make fun of me. I don't make fun of you. Of the proletariat had been infected Western communist ideology. At the time of Wright's sojourn in the party from 1934 to 42, the primary focus of the movement in Western Europe and the United States was the defeat of fascism. It was a fundamental tenet of party work that fascism was an instrument of the ruling class designed to meet the crisis of world capitalism embodied in the Depression with big D. Great Depression, right? As such, fascism as an ideology was presumed to be alien to the working class. Earl Browder, a general secretary of the American Communist Party, had made this position abundantly clear in reports, speeches, and articles during the late 1930s. As the official voice of the American Communist Party, Browder had argued that the struggle of the movement was predominantly a political one. What is the message? Oh, the quote is, what is the message that this powerful voice of the Communist Party is giving? What is the message that this powerful voice of the Communist Party is giving to America? First of all, it is the message of the need for the great mass of people, the workers and farmers, to organize for their own protection. Browder's strategy was a simple one. The growth of the Communist Party is the greatest guarantee against reaction and fascism. Browder's leadership had positioned the party in support of the New Deal and Roosevelt's administration under the presumption that American workers were not ready to confront the issue of socialism. In effect, the party pursued the contradictory girl. Sorry. The contradictory aims of reform and revolution. This was in part a consequence, as Wilhelm Reich had pointed out, with respect to the German communist movement during the Weimar, sorry for mispronunciation, Republic, a failing to distinguish between the abstraction of class consciousness and its specific historical form. Just as critical, however, the party was committed by the instructions of the Comintern Communist International to a united front with its class enemies. For Wright, the question of the consciousness of workers and consequently that of political organization was more complex. It evolved. This girl, have mercy. What the hell? Oh, sorry. I hope I'm allowed to say that. It involved, as he was to write in defense of Native Son, the dark and hidden places of human personality. In the essay, How Bigger Was Born, Wright had been more explicit. The civilization that had given birth to Bigger contained no spiritual sustenance, had created no culture that could hold and claim his allegiance and faith, had sensitized him and left him stranded, a free agent to roam the streets of our cities, a hot and whirling vortex of undisciplined and unchannelized impulses. This reminds me of I'm gonna keep that one for myself right now. I was fan- yeah. I was fascinated by the similarity of the emotional tensions of Bigger in America and Bigger in Nazi Germany and Bigger in Old Russia. All Bigger Thomases, white and black, felt tense, afraid, nervous, hysterical, and restless. Certain modern experiences were creating types of personalities whose existence ignored racial and national lines of demarcation. Wright was a Wright was attempting to come to terms with the psychological consequence of a historical condition of which the leadership of the communist movement was only vaguely aware. Wright was insisting on the necessity for understanding the working class in their own terms. He was concerned with the ability of the proletarian masses to reproduce themselves spiritually and culturally. But didn't Richard Wright have beef with Zora Neale Hurston when she's literally? I'm gonna have to ask my smart friends about that one. Well, not beef, like beef, but like he critiqued her and was like, "Why are you using that language?" I bet it's in here. How It Feels to Be Colored Me, Zora Neale Hurston. Wait, we should read this. I love Miss Zora. I have. Hold on. Because she even had. Look, yeah. So in this book, it has like characteristics of Negro expression, metaphor and simile, the double, descriptive, verbal nouns, nouns from verbs, angularity, asymmetry, dancing, Negro folklore, cultural heroes. I need to put my face mask. We're gonna come back to this. Promise. Hopefully, no promises actually. I will come back to this. If you are interested, let me know and I will record a video of reading it. But I will definitely get back to that. If they could no longer recreate the social ideologies that had sustained them, it would not be possible for them to fulfill the historical role that Marxian theory assigned them. Wait, I should have used that in my essay. Girl. When I was writing the essay, I was literally like having a whole freaking like breakdown. That's when my skin problem was starting to like spread, but I didn't know what was happening. But I was also like, okay, I'm gonna ignore this because I have to get good grades. And did I get good grades? Yes. But then I was also going through a friendship breakup with someone that I had been best friends with for 8 years, and it was like horrible, girl. And my essay, crap. It could have been a lot better. However, I can always rewrite it. And now that because like every time I read a like book, I'm literally like, oh, I could have used that. That would be much better in supporting the argument, evidence used to be supporting my argument. Okay. Moreover, the fragmentation of personality, social relations, and ideology that Wright observed and recreated was so total that its political and historical implications seriously challenged the presumptions of the communist movement. That kind of reminds me of right now, I'm not gonna lie. And then the quote is, I felt that Bigger, an American product, a native son of this land, carried within him the potentialities of either communism or fascism. Whether he'll follow some gaudy historical leader who will promise rashly to fill the void in him, or whether he'll come to terms with the millions of his kindred fellow workers and under trade unions or revolutionary guidance depends upon the future drift of events in America. But Bigger Thomas, conditioned to his organism, will not become an ardent or even lukewarm supporter of the status quo. Delish. He realized that no political movement that, for ideological reasons, presumed the progressive character of the working class. He realized that no political movement that, for ideological reasons, presumed the progressive character of the working class would succeed. Wright's novel subsequently was a refutation of radical dogma from the vantage point of Black experience. He sought first to recreate that experience and in so doing to force the confrontation between it and socialist ideology. I need a new pen. Bigger Thomas's character was specific to the historical experience of Blacks in the United States, but his nature was proletarian, that is, world historical. When Wright gave the consciousness of Bigger Thomas a nationalist character, he was addressing himself to both these aspects of his creation. He wrote that he was confronted with that part of him that was dual in aspect, a part of all Negroes and all whites. If the American Revolutionary Movement could not come to terms with the appeals of fascism, then it would not begin to understand the immediate nature of the working class. He agreed with Marx that capitalism as a form of organization led to the destruction of social consciousness founded in non-capitalist social orders. Okay. He did not accept, however, the notion that this process led to new ideological synthesis. The truer result, the observed result, was a world that existed on a plane of animal sensation alone. Actually, I will bring it up. There's this book called Sacred Sexuality, Ancient Egyptian Tantric Yoga, which talks about, among other many things, the connection between your lower impulses and your higher self. You know how like the Sphinx lays there with like an animal of a body, a body of an animal, but the face, the head of a person. That's connecting your lower orders to your higher, harmony. However, that takes like a spiritual evolution, a spiritual maturity that is not developed here in America. White supremacy kills the soul. It kills the human. If I can internalize white supremacy and dehumanize you, I have dehumanized myself. Once you can do something to someone else, like what I can do to you, like do unto others as if you would want done unto yourself. If I dehumanize you, I have already dehumanized myself. It's like a mirror. You know what I mean? Like if you can look into the eyes of somebody and I see you as non-human, an alien, an illegal alien, the N-word, well, this, that, and the third, I have already dehumanized myself. I am not human to me. You know what I mean? But anyways, let's keep going. The Nazi movement succeeded because it offered, in the stead of an existential terror, a new unambiguous social order. And then you see currently right now, the rise of conservatism is a little bit because it's easy. There are set rules, man, woman, good, bad, white, black. And it's easy. It's like white or black, non-ambiguous. There's no gray, there's no color. Do you see? Anyways, the implicit, most unconscious or preconscious assumption that ideas upon which whole nations and races act and live. Yet Wright's analysis did not end there. He had something more to say about the nature of revolutionary action. His analysis both underscored the absolute character of revolutionary commitment and also spoke to Marxian class analysis. And the quote says, I remember reading a passage in both. Oh yeah, I did write a little note there about that book. I remember reading a passage in a book dealing with old Russia which said, we must be ready to make endless sacrifices if we are able, oh my goodness, Alana, if we are to be able to overthrow the czar, actions and feelings of men 10,000 miles from home helped me understand the moods and impulses of those walking in streets of Chicago and Dixie. Wright recognized that his bigger I don't know. My brain sometimes doesn't work, and that's okay. That's okay. It's okay. Wright recognized in his bigger Thomases the desperation that was the precondition for the making of total and violent revolutionary commitments. He understood those commitments to be less ones of choice than of compulsion. The more total the degradation of the human being, the more total the reaction, the need for a whole life and acted out of that need. Runaway Slaves, Rebels on a Plantation. I highly recommend this book. Highly, 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 highly. It's so good. It made me cry just for a section though, but then it because it's girl. These people are sick weirdo freaks. However, it's okay. Keep going. Because that's the thing in this book. It's like that. It keeps repeating. It's the need to be free. At the end of the day, it's the continue. That people kept going. But anyways, it also refused to do. I'm like realizing that I'm going on my little tangent. So I'm like, oh, keep it short, girl. He also refused to dismiss Bigger Thomas as lumpen proletariat or to distinguish them from the proletariat. In Native Son, he actually anticipated a thesis on violence and the lumper proletariat that would become better known later through the work of Frantz Fanon. Girl, I have his Black Skin, White Mask. I am almost halfway through. I do want Richard of the Earth though, but this one, it's good. I'm not gonna lie, it is good. I mean, why would I lie? But for Wright, the violence of the lumper proletariat was not only an objective force of revolution, violence could not be separated out from the formation of consciousness. Importante. And then the quote said, I didn't want to kill, Bigger shouted, but what I killed for, I am. What precisely the Bigger Thomases would kill for, Wright could not answer. He had stated his thesis, and it was now left to the future drift of events to make that determination, that is, the capacity of the American radical movement to develop a critical political theory. This, of course, was not to be the case. Wright had emerged from the Depression with a clear and powerful image of American society and world history. With the writing of Uncle Tom's Children and Native Son, he had extracted from the misery of poverty and imminent social collapse an understanding of a systemic integration in which racism was a secondary residual phenomenon. He had no reason to doubt, we're going to come back to that. He had no reason to doubt that the disintegration of the capitalist world was really a promise of liberation, a promise that enveloped the whole of humanity. Period. Yet he possessed few illusions about this process of disintegration. He knew in social terms that even in human terms, that the immediate cost would be unparalleled violence, brutality, and vengeance. At first, he hoped that this historical transformation would be surgical in its order. He believed in a conscious, deliberate, and magnanimous workers' movement. But by the time he was writing Native Son, however, this ordered revolution had been replaced by chaos consisting of the collective action of a brutalized human force. The destruction of capitalism would come at the hands of the brute social force it had itself created. Still, Wright saw this brutalized mass as the promise of its future. Unlike Marx, Wright anticipated barbarism and socialism. Period. Okay, we're at 30 minutes. The next one is Blacks as the negation of capitalism, and then The Outsider as a critique of Christianity and Marxism, and then the ending, chapter 12. So that will be the next video. Okay, thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. Love y'all.